Well, you can spend all offseason talking about all the guys you're going to add, all the transfers and all the recruits and all of this and that. But when it comes down to it, the most important piece that was added to Pitt's roster this offseason is one that was there all along. This is the Morning Pitt here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Welcome to the Wednesday edition of the Morning Pitt here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You like that little, we're changing up the format, trying some different things here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, giving you something a little bit different. We moved that little intro screen, 30 seconds into the video. I tried that yesterday. And then, at the request of one of the viewers, we add a little music to it. I don't know. We'll see how that goes. I tried some different sound effects. Tried the music. Tried this weird little countdown sound effect. But I tested both of those on my focus group, which was my kids, and they said they liked the music one better than the countdown one. So if you don't like the music, maybe I'll try the countdown one next time. I'm guessing I'll probably stick with the music, but you know the deal here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. The Morning Pitt videos that we put out every day of the week, Monday through Friday, every day talking about the latest going on in Pitt sports, football, basketball, recruiting, whatever's happening in Pitt sports. We talk about it right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And all we ask you to do is like the video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You know the like button, you know the subscribe button. Click both of those. I would really appreciate it. And then head over to Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. You don't want to skip over the first 2 minutes, since now we're talking about things, and then we get to the intro screen, and then I get to this little sales pitch on going to check out the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. You know the deal. You know the spiel. And if you've been not skipping over these first 2 minutes of every video, you probably could repeat it yourself. And hopefully it's starting to sink in and you're going to check it out to get the latest and best Pitt sports coverage that you're going to find on the internet, in addition to the best online community of Pitt fans that's out there. It's the message boards at Panther-Lair.com, and if you're a Pitt fan, you want to be there all day, every day. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. And I'm not joking about being on the message boards all day, every day. Yesterday was one of those days to do it. Really, over the weekend, the last few days, I would say, Sunday, Monday, and yesterday were days to do it because there were posts about Blake Hinson and kind of updates along the way. I had an update yesterday morning. Right before yesterday's Morning Pitt video went live. There was some updates from posters who have some information, because it's not just me and Jim Hammett and Houston Wilson and the writers at Panther-Lair.com who provide the information on the message boards. There's also posters who have connections to the football program, the basketball program, and the athletic department at large, and they share some info there. And certainly the word we were hearing, which I said yesterday on the Morning Pitt, was that it sounded like Blake Hinson was likely to come back. Hinson, of course, went out and tested the NBA draft process, tested the waters. NBA allows for a player to sort of enter the draft process, work out with teams, and get genuine, legitimate feedback from NBA teams and organizations about their readiness for the pros. And the whole process allows you to maintain your eligibility, so that if it doesn't work out, if you don't get the feedback that you'd like, or the general response is, hey kid, go back to school, you still have the opportunity to go back to school. Football and the NFL, college football and the NFL have not figured out a way to do this on that side of things, but basketball has. And Blake Hinson entered the process the way Justin Champagnie did a few years ago. Champagnie ended up staying in the NBA draft process and went into the NBA draft. Blake Hinson decided it's not for him, not yet at least. And so he's coming back to Pitt for one more year. And I said it yesterday, I'm certainly not the only one to say it. You don't even need me to say it, but that's huge. That's absolutely huge for Pitt. And I gotta say, from the time that Blake Hinson announced he was going through the NBA draft process, I shouldn't say I never thought he was going to actually go, but I mostly looked at it like, he'll probably be back. I don't really see him going to the NBA. But then over the last day or two, even though I was hearing confidence about him likely returning, even though I was here, that was sort of the word we were getting from different sources around the program, I started thinking about what a world would look like without Blake Hinson. What Pitt basketball in 2023-24 would look like without Blake Hinson. And boy, the team loses a lot of punch They lose a lot without him on the court. I mean, you're talking about the team's leading scorer and rebounder last season, so that's obviously a pretty big, hole to fill. But you've already got all these holes to fill with Jamarius Burton and Nelly Cummings and Nike Sabandi gone and Greg Elliott gone. Hinson was not only the leading scorer from a year ago, but he was pretty much all that came back in terms of volume scoring. And if you take him out of the mix, a lineup that I think probably a decent number of us have some questions about in terms of scoring punch and what the ceiling is and how explosive and how potent this team can be. I think we all probably have some questions about it, and those questions would increase tenfold, if not 100-fold, if Blake Hinson's not in the mix. I remember talking last year. Geez, it was like 3 months ago. I remember talking during the season, I should say. It feels like last year. Part of it took place in 2022. But a few months ago, I remember talking, particularly as things were really heating up, about how Hinson really was the X factor for this team. He was the leading scorer, but he was the X factor, not necessarily in terms of volatility. But you had all these guys who filled all these roles, and then you have this guy who's really kind of unique. And he's hard to sort of pigeonhole into what his role is and what kind of player he is. He's this, 6'7" tight end who can shoot threes from literally anywhere on the court. And you can't really pigeonhole his game. It's hard to really sort of put a type on what player he is or what kind of player he is. It's not he's not necessarily the old dirty Hinson. That there's no father to his styles, and he's not the first guy his size and his build who has been able to shoot threes. But he was pretty unique among Pitt's team last year, and his scoring really was a big part of the success. I mean, the impact he made. There's a lot of guys who can take credit for last season's success. Hinson's pretty far up there at the top, and again, not just because he was the team's leading scorer, but because he was such an X factor in terms of the energy he brought, in terms of the attitude he brought, and in terms of how he could just literally turn a game around with his shooting, and the whole team fed off of it. And there were a lot of great energy guys on the team last year. I think they fed off of Greg Elliott's unending and undying optimism and positive energy. I mean, that guy was he was positive energy from the start to the finish. And there were times when his frustration got the better of him, but he was positive energy through and through. Nelly Cummings brought a lot of great energy. Jamarius Burton, I once called him a stoic hoops monk. And I think it was Dave Damashek said he should his nickname should be Thelonious Dunk, which was great, except Burton didn't dunk, so that was the hard thing about getting that nickname to stick on. He wasn't as much of an energy guy. I think he led through sort of I think his words and his actions. I think he was a calming presence for the team. He wasn't as much energy as kind of a spark. Like Nike Spark Sabandi. You remember when Nike Sabandi's nickname was Spark on this video program and nowhere else. But Hinson brought a certain kind of energy and attitude and swagger to this team, in addition to his scoring production, which is obviously what backed up all of those other things. And he really was an X factor in terms of the impact he had on the team's success, and just overall what happened with the program last year. And if it was important last year, if it was extremely significant when he was surrounded by Jamarius Burton and Nelly Cummings and Nike Sabandi and Greg Elliott, I think it's 10 times more important this year when the most veteran players he's surrounded by are Will Jeffers, who didn't even play last year, and then, in terms of guys, veterans in the Pitt program, it's Federico and the Diaz-Graham twins who've been around for 1 year each. They're in their second year. Otherwise, you're looking at freshmen, and we'll include Dior Johnson in that group. I think that's probably just something, a caveat we can put out there going forward. In my mind, when I think about the freshmen on this team, I think about Jalen Lowe, I think about Carlton Carrington, I think about Marlon Barnes, I think about Papa Conte, I think about Dior Johnson. I mean, he's been here for a year. He practiced for some of that time. He did not play. He was not a part of the team in terms of what they did on the court. any more than Carlton Carrington and Jalen Lowe and Marlon Barnes and Papa Conte were. And he has never played in a college basketball game. So in my mind, he's a freshman. In my mind, you're looking at 5 freshmen on this team. And that's what Blake Hinson is surrounded by this year. 5 freshmen and 2 transfers. That's 7 out of the 13 scholarship players. You're talking about, and I mean, right now it's only 12. So you're talking about quite a bit more than half of the scholarship players on this roster are basically brand new. And so it's a different kind of roster, even though, I mean, last year Cummings and Elliott were brand new. But you had Burton, you had Sabandi. It was just a different kind of roster in terms of leadership. And I think Blake Hinson now, if maybe even more than he was a year ago, he's the nucleus of this thing. He is the core and the foundation. And I've spent a lot of time over the last couple of days thinking about this, about what that means, about what Hinson's role really is. I mean, is he going to have to step into a Nelly Cummings role in terms of leading the team on the court? Is he going to have to step into a Jamarius Burton role in terms of leading the team off the court? Is he going to have to be Greg Elliott in terms of bringing that positive energy? He can't do all those things and also be Nike Sabandi and be the spark off the bench. That part doesn't work. If he wants to if he wants to form like Voltron out of all of those guys, he can't really bring anything of Sabandi unless it's, I don't know what part of Sabandi he can bring in terms of, not just basketball skills, but, Burton's stoic leadership and Cummings, energy and leadership and on the court demeanor and how he kind of controlled the team, and Elliott's positivity and all those things. Burton, if Hinson, I mean, I guess if he wants to step into all those roles, he can. I don't know how well that would go, but I think what needs to happen, this is a long-winded way of getting around to what I think what needs to happen with Blake Hinson, is he needs to be Blake. All right? He needs to be that energy, that swagger. He needs to be all those things he was last year, but he needs to be a leader for this team. He needs to be the guy at the top of the pyramid, particularly while those younger guys come along, while Ishmael Leggett finds his role and Zach Austin finds his role, and the 5 freshmen sort of come into their own, particularly Johnson, Lowe, and Carrington, who are going to be playing a lot. Those guys are going to need to grow into their roles with this team, and I think it can take a little bit longer with freshmen than it will with transfers. I think Nelly Cummings found his role pretty quickly. I think Greg Elliott found his role pretty quickly. I think Blake Hinson found his role pretty quickly. I think Ishmael Leggett and Zach Austin will find their roles. It's going to take some time for Johnson, Carrington, and Lowe to figure out how they fit into this thing, in addition to Barnes and Conte. It's going to take some time for them to figure it out, and I think they'll get there. And I think a lot of the expectations for success about this team are based on those guys all sort of coming together and figuring it out and understanding how they work on this team and how they function. But in the meantime, Hinson's going to have to be the guy leading the charge. He's going to be the main focus of the offense. He's going to be the main focus for the other team's defense. And he's going to be the one who, particularly if he can step his game up from a year ago, he's going to be the one that carries this team to a lot of victories. Now, ideally, he gets you through November and most of December, and by the time the calendar year changes, or by the time you're a week or two, by Christmas or so, Johnson is settled in, Lowe is settled in, Carrington is settled in. The 2 transfers have found their place, and they're leading. And then, of course, Federico and the Diaz-Graham twins just keep building. I think we saw that progress game by game, week by week, month by month last season. They're going to have to just do that and just keep it going. And if they do, I think they'll be in good shape. They're just going to have to keep it going. And ideally, like I say, by the time you get to Christmas, you've got kind of a good feel for what the rotation will look like. What will the rotation look like? I mean, it's funny, we've talked a lot about the rotation over the past, when they've added a transfer, when they got Austin, when they got Leggett, when they got Papa Conte. We talked about the rotation and how it kind of fits together. And we always talked about it assuming Blake Hinson would be part of it. So it doesn't really change. But again, I look at Dior Johnson and Jalen Lowe as your point guards. Carlton Carrington and Ishmael Leggett as your off-ball guards. And again, you could have 2 of those guys out of Johnson, Lowe, Leggett, Carrington. You could have one of the point guards, one of the 2s. Or you could have two ones and a two, or two twos and a one playing. You could still go three guards, I think, with that group. I think you can find some interesting three guard combinations. But I think you're also going to want to have Zach Austin on the court at a wing spot. And it's going to be a different kind of wing spot than what they had last year, where you were going Cummings and Burton, and then Greg Elliott or Nike Subandi were playing that three. Zach Austin's going to be a different kind of guy. He's going to be a rebounder. He's going to be an explosive athlete. He's got the ability to shoot from outside, and I think he's going to play differently, and Pitt's going to look different with him in that role than what they looked like a year ago. I think Hinson still stays at the 4. I think that's his role with Jorge Diaz-Graham backing him up. And then I think at the 5, and I think it got a little more interesting with Papa Conte coming into the mix. I mean, Federico is your starter. And the question is really what happens behind him. And I said when Papa Conte committed that, I still see it as being Federico, and Guillermo Diaz-Graham. With Papa Conte as kind of the third guy behind them at center. Which I don't think, and I don't think that means he gets 2 minutes a game. I think there's an opportunity for a decent chunk of minutes for a freshman center who's playing as the number 3 guy, particularly if Federico gets in foul trouble early in a half. There's going to be a lot of playing time for the third center the rest of that half. And then I think there's some flexibility with a few of these guys, particularly the Diaz-Graham twins. I mean, I think it's a possibility that Guillermo could play some 4. I think, if he can defend in that position, I think it's a possibility. And he could play next to Federico, or maybe even next to Papa Conte. I think the coaches are very much willing to experiment with Jorge Diaz-Graham playing the 4 or the 3. Somewhat interchangeable positions with the way Pitt plays anyway, but I think they could use him there. And, Jorge backing up Zach Austin, in addition to Will Jeffers, who I think could probably do that as well, play the 3 or the 4. So they've got some flexibility there. So, I mean, you talk about your 1 and your 2, you've got Johnson, Lowe, Carrington, Leggett. And then, your 3 and your 4, you've kind of got Austin, Jeffress, Hinson, and Jorge, with Hinson mostly at the 4 and Austin mostly at the 3. Jeffress and Jorge potentially could go back and forth a little bit. And then at your 5, you've really got Federico, Guillermo, and Papa Conte, with Guillermo potentially, having some flexibility to move around depending on how he's come along defensively. So there are some moving parts. There's some flexibility in the lineup. There's some versatility in the lineup. They could do some different things. But again, getting Blake Hinson back in the mix keeps this team, I think, on the right track. They're going to have to find offense somewhere else anyway, but at least now they've still got that core, that nuclear core of Blake Hinson and everything he brings with it. The energy, the emotion, the swagger, and most of all, the shooting. And he's back. So definitely good news for Pitt. Still leaves one scholarship spot open. I think obviously a transfer guard, a veteran guard would be a great piece to add at this point in the process. It's going to be a tough call of who you could find. I keep saying maybe a Sidi Nadir type might be your best option. If they can find that, go get it. But otherwise, still feel pretty good about what this group looks like, really 1 through 11. With Marlon Barnes being guy number 12, and I think he's got a world of upside playing the 2 or the 3. So pretty good group here. 1 through 10 for sure. 1 through 11 really, if Papa Conte gets into the mix as the third center, and then 1 through 12 when you include Marlon Barnes. Not a lot of dead weight, not a lot of filler. Pretty strong lineup, and Jeff Capel's putting together a group that I think can, have some success in the ACC once again. And it's what we've talked about for a while, that this team's going to look different, I think, than last year. They've got different types of players in different positions who, and players who can do different things than the players could do last year. They might not do the things that last year's players did as well, but they might have their own things they can do that can make this team dangerous. And we'll certainly keep talking about those things a lot over the next 5 months, 6 months, as long as, to get into the season. I think we're going to have a lot to talk about with this Pitt basketball team. It's been fun talking about them already this offseason because I think they've had a pretty good offseason. Listen, we'll have more conversation about Blake Hinson's decision tonight on the live Panther-Lair show right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. 8:30 p.m. Our friend Jim Hammett from Panther-Lair.com is going to join us. Again, we've been having fun doing this for the last few weeks, and we're excited to have Jim back. We'll see what he thinks about Blake Hinson coming back. And we'll talk about a lot of other Pitt sports topics, football, basketball, recruiting. We'll preview the official visit weekend, which just starts tomorrow. Of course, tomorrow morning's Morning Pitt is going to have a lot on that as well. But if you want to stay on top of all of the news, it's right there. Panther-Lair.com. Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Go check it out right now. And but before you leave, like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. So thanks for checking the Morning Pitt out today. We'll see you tonight at 8:30 for the live Panther-Lair show. And we'll be back again tomorrow morning for what is this called? The Morning Pitt right here. youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.